Psalm 79 is a communal lament attributed to Asaph, expressing the deep anguish and sorrow of the Israelites following the destruction of Jerusalem, likely by the Babylonian army. The psalm begins with a vivid depiction of the devastation. The heathen nations have invaded God's inheritance, defiled His holy temple, and laid Jerusalem in ruins. The psalmist describes the horrific sight of the dead bodies of God's servants being left unburied, serving as food for birds and wild animals, and the blood of the saints flowing like water around Jerusalem with none to bury them. The psalmist then turns to a plea for God's compassion and intervention. He acknowledges the anger and wrath that has fallen upon them, asking God how long His anger will burn against them. The psalmist implores God to pour out His wrath not on Israel but on the heathen nations who do not know Him and on kingdoms that do not call on His name. This reflects a deep sense of injustice and a plea for divine retribution against those who have committed these atrocities. The psalmist continues by appealing to God's mercy and the need for His forgiveness. He asks God not to remember the iniquities of their ancestors but to let His compassion come swiftly to meet them, for they are in desperate need. The psalmist pleads for God to help them for the glory of His name, to deliver and atone for their sins for His name's sake. This part of the psalm highlights the community's recognition of their need for God's grace and their appeal to His reputation and honor. The psalm concludes with a vow of future faithfulness and praise. The psalmist asks God to repay their neighbors sevenfold for the reproach they have hurled at Him, showing a desire for justice and vindication. He then promises that God's people, the sheep of His pasture, will give thanks forever and recount His praise to all generations. This final section expresses a hope for restoration and a commitment to continued worship and gratitude toward God. Psalm 79 encapsulates the sorrow of a devastated community, their plea for divine intervention, and their enduring hope in God's mercy and justice. Let's now read Psalms chapter 79. A psalm of Asaph. O God, the heathen are come into thine inheritance, thy holy temple have they defiled, they have laid Jerusalem on heaps. The dead bodies of thy servants have they given to be meat unto the fowls of the heaven, the flesh of thy saints unto the beasts of the earth. Their blood have they shed like water round about Jerusalem, and there was none to bury them. We are become a reproach to our neighbors, a scorn and derision to them that are round about us. How long, Lord? Wilt thou be angry forever? Shall thy jealousy burn like fire? Pour out thy wrath upon the heathen that have not known thee, and upon the kingdoms that have not called upon thy name. For they have devoured Jacob, and laid waste his dwelling place. O remember not against us former iniquities, let thy tender mercies speedily prevent us, for we are brought very low. Help us, O God of our salvation, for the glory of thy name, and deliver us, and purge away our sins, for thy name's sake. Wherefore should the heathen say, where is their God? Let him be known among the heathen in our sight by the revenging of the blood of thy servants which is shed. Let the sighing of the prisoner come before thee, according to the greatness of thy power preserve thou those that are appointed to die. And render unto our neighbors sevenfold into their bosom their reproach, wherewith they have reproached thee, O Lord. So we thy people and sheep of thy pasture will give thee thanks forever, we will show forth thy praise to all generations. This ends our reading of Psalms chapter 79.